Okay, seriously though, how many times have you agreed to something when you really just wanted to say no? Like you're already so overwhelmed you can barely breathe, but you still find yourself saying yes. It's like we're programmed to be people pleasers, even if it means sacrificing our own sanity.
You're absolutely right. It's incredibly common to feel that pressure to say yes. Even when we know we don't have the time or energy, it's like we're afraid to disappoint people or let them down.
And then we end up feeling resentful and burned out.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle. But what if I told you that no is a complete sentence? You don't need to justify your choices. You don't need to offer a million excuses. Just a simple no is enough.
That's such a powerful concept. It's about recognizing that your time and energy are valuable and you have the right to protect them.
It's like giving ourselves permission to prioritize our own well-being without feeling guilty.
Exactly. And when you start setting boundaries, you're essentially saying yes to yourself. You're saying yes to your own needs and priorities.
Which ultimately allows us to show up as our best selves for others.
Precisely. When you're constantly overextended and depleted, you're not really doing anyone any favors.
So how do we break free from this cycle of people-pleasing and overcommitment? Where do we even begin?
It starts with understanding that setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of self-respect. It's about recognizing that you deserve to be treated with respect, and that includes respecting your own limits.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
But in practice,
Yeah.
how do we actually start saying no without feeling like a total jerk?
One helpful tip is to reframe the way you think about saying no. Instead of seeing it as a rejection, think of it as a way of honoring your commitments to yourself.
Ooh, I like that. It's like saying yes to my own well-being.
Exactly. And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes.
It's like building a muscle. At first, it might feel awkward or uncomfortable, but with repetition, it becomes second nature.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways to say no. You don't always have to be blunt or direct. You can be polite and respectful while still setting a firm boundary.
So what are some examples of how we can say no gracefully?
For instance, if someone asks you to do something you don't have time for, you could say something like, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm completely swamped right now. Or, I wish I could, but I've already committed to something else.
Those are great examples. They're polite but firm.
And remember, you don't need to over-explain or apologize. Just state your boundary and move on.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of setting boundaries and how to say no gracefully. But what about that guilt that often creeps in when we even think about saying no? What's the deal with that?
That guilt often stems from societal conditioning. We've been taught to be helpful, accommodating, and put others' needs before our own. But that can lead to a pattern of overgiving and neglecting our own needs.
It's like we've internalized this message that saying no makes us bad people.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that you have the right to prioritize your own well-being. You deserve to be happy and healthy, and that sometimes means saying no to things that drain you or don't align with your values.
So it's about unlearning those old patterns and giving ourselves permission to set boundaries without guilt.
It's a process, but it's definitely possible. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear. But let's be real, setting boundaries can be challenging, especially in certain situations. Like what about when a close friend or family member asks for a favor? How do you say no without hurting their feelings or damaging the relationship?
Those are definitely trickier situations, but it's important to remember that you can still be supportive and loving without sacrificing your own well-being.
So it's about finding that balance between being there for others and being there for yourself.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself in order to be fully present and supportive for the people you care about.
That makes a lot of sense. So setting boundaries isn't about being selfish. It's actually the most generous thing we can do for ourselves and for the people around us.
Absolutely. It allows us to show up with more energy, enthusiasm, and genuine care for the things and people that matter most.
This is all making so much sense. It's like a whole new way of looking at self-care and boundaries. But I'm curious, what are some of the benefits of setting boundaries and embracing the power of no? What can our viewers expect if they start implementing these ideas?
Well, one of the biggest benefits is a significant reduction in stress and overwhelm. When you're constantly overextended and people-pleasing, it takes a toll on your mental and emotional well-being.
That makes sense. It's like carrying around a heavy weight all the time.
Exactly. But when you start setting boundaries, you create more space and time for yourself, which allows you to relax, recharge, and focus on the things that truly matter to you.
That sounds amazing. It's like hitting the reset button on your life.
And another benefit is increased productivity and focus. When you're not constantly bogged down by other people's demands, you can devote more energy to your own goals and priorities.
So it's not just about feeling less stressed, it's about actually accomplishing more.
Precisely. And as you start experiencing these benefits, it creates a positive feedback loop. You feel more confident in your ability to set boundaries, which empowers you to set even more boundaries.
Wow, it's like a snowball effect of awesome.
Exactly. And that leads to even greater levels of peace, productivity, and fulfillment.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
But let's be real, setting boundaries can be challenging, especially if you're used to being a people pleaser. What are some tips for overcoming that initial resistance and sticking to our boundaries?
One thing that can be helpful is to remind yourself why you're setting boundaries in the first place. What are the benefits you're hoping to experience? How will setting boundaries improve your life? Write down your reasons and refer back to them whenever you're feeling tempted to overcommit or cave to someone else's demands.
That's a great idea. It's like having a personal cheerleader in your pocket.
Exactly. And another tip is to start small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Choose one area where you feel particularly drained or resentful and start setting boundaries there.
Okay, so baby steps.
Exactly. As you gain confidence and experience, you can gradually expand your boundary setting to other areas of your life.
That makes sense. It's like learning to walk before you run.
Precisely. And remember, setting boundaries is a skill that takes practice. You're not going to get it perfect right away, and that's okay.
So be patient with yourself.
Yes. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your successes, and learn from any missteps along the way.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. The more you practice, the easier it will become.
This is all so incredibly helpful. I feel like I'm finally starting to understand the true power of no and how it can transform my life. But I'm curious, is there anything else our viewers should keep in mind as they embark on their boundary setting journey?
One thing that's important to remember is that setting boundaries is not about controlling other people. It's about taking responsibility for your own well-being and creating healthy, respectful relationships.
That's a really important distinction. It's not about dictating how other people should behave. It's about making choices that are aligned with your own values and needs.
Exactly. And sometimes setting boundaries might mean that certain relationships change or evolve.
Because not everyone is going to be comfortable with your newfound assertiveness.
That's true. And that's okay.
So it's about accepting that not everyone will be on board with our boundary setting, and that's perfectly fine.
Exactly. It's your life, and you get to choose who you surround yourself with and how you allow yourself to be treated.
So it's about creating a life that feels good on the inside and out.
Precisely. A life that reflects your true values and aspirations.
And that brings us to another important aspect of creating a more fulfilling life, cultivating a positive mindset.
Yes, because your mindset plays a huge role in your ability to set boundaries and stick to them.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. The people we surround ourselves with have a huge impact on our energy, our outlook, even our beliefs about what's possible.
So if you're constantly around people who are negative, draining, or just not supportive of your growth,
It's going to be much harder to cultivate that positive mindset we were talking about.
and harder to set those boundaries.
Exactly. You might start doubting yourself, second-guessing your decisions.
And then it becomes a slippery slope back into people-pleasing and overcommitting.
It's a real danger.
But on the flip side, when you surround yourself with people who uplift you, who encourage your growth, who celebrate your no's as much as your yeses,
That's when the magic happens. You start to believe in yourself more. You feel more confident in your choices.
and that inner strength makes it so much easier to set those boundaries and prioritize your well-being.
It's like having a cheerleading squad for your soul.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how can our viewers be more intentional about cultivating that kind of positive support system?
It's a process. Start by paying attention to how you feel after spending time with certain people. Do you feel energized and inspired or drained and depleted?
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the routine of seeing certain people without really evaluating the impact they have on us.
It's so important to be mindful of those energy dynamics. And once you've identified those relationships that feel truly supportive and nourishing,
Yeah, those people who lift you up and make you feel like you can conquer the world.
exactly, those are the people you want to invest in. Make time for those connections. Prioritize those relationships.
Or maybe create a little distance from those energy vampires who leave you feeling drained and depleted.
Right. It's not about cutting people out of your life completely,
Yeah,
but maybe adjusting the frequency or nature of your interactions.
like maybe you grab coffee with that friend instead of spending an entire evening rehashing their relationship dramas.
Exactly. It's about being mindful and making choices that support your well-being.
So it's all about saying no to the things and people that drain us so we can say a big enthusiastic yes to the things and people that light us up.
That's a great way to put it. And when you have that kind of positive support system in place, it makes all the difference in the world. It gives you the strength and courage to pursue your dreams and live a life that feels truly authentic to you.
It's like having a safety net of love and encouragement so you can take risks and grow without fear of falling flat on your face.
Beautifully put. And that sense of safety and support is crucial for cultivating self-respect and setting those boundaries we talked about earlier.
Okay, so it all comes full circle.
Hmm.
Let's get down to brass tacks here. If someone is listening to this thinking, okay, I get it, boundaries are awesome. No is my new power word. But where do I even begin? What's step one?
Step one is to get really honest with yourself about where those boundaries are needed most. Which areas of your life leave you feeling the most drained or resentful? Is it work? Family commitments? Maybe it's that friend who always expects you to drop everything and listen to their relationship dramas for the 100th time?
So it's about pinpointing those specific situations where you're saying yes when every cell in your body is screaming, no PE.
Exactly. Once you've identified those areas, you can start brainstorming some boundaries you could set.
Give me some examples.
Hmm.
What kinds of boundaries can people consider setting?
Well, it depends on the situation, of course. But here are a few ideas. If work is constantly bleeding into your personal time, maybe you set a boundary of not checking emails after a certain hour. Or maybe you limit the amount of overtime you're willing to work.
Yeah, like creating a sacred space for your personal time where work is not allowed to intrude. What about social situations? Those can be tricky.
Absolutely. If you're feeling overwhelmed by social obligations, maybe you start declining invitations to events that you know will drain you. Or maybe you set a time limit for how long you'll stay at a gathering. You could even practice a graceful exit strategy like, it's been lovely catching up, but I have an early morning tomorrow. I'm going to head out now.
Ooh, I
Huh.
like that one. I'm definitely adding that to my repertoire of boundary setting moves. What about dealing with those people who just love to push your buttons? The ones who seem to thrive on drama and emotional chaos?
Those can be particularly challenging, but it's important to remember that you don't have to engage in their drama. You can set boundaries around the topics you're willing to discuss, or even limit the amount of time you spend interacting with them. Sometimes the healthiest boundary you can set is distance.
So it's about protecting your own energy and peace of mind, even if it means having some tough conversations or making some difficult choices.
Exactly. And remember, setting boundaries is a process, not a one-time event. It takes practice, and it's okay to start small. Don't try to do everything at once. Choose one or two areas where you want to set boundaries and focus on those first.
That makes sense. It's like building any new habit. You start with small, manageable steps and gradually build up your strength and confidence over time. What are some other tips for people who are just starting out on their boundary setting journey?
One important tip is to be clear and concise in your communication. Use I statements to express your needs and limits. For example, instead of saying, you always expect me to drop everything and help you, you could say, I feel overwhelmed when I'm constantly being asked to take on extra responsibilities. I need to prioritize my own workload right now.
Yeah, that's much more effective than blaming or accusing the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to reiterate your boundaries if someone tries to push back. It's okay to say no more than once. Remember, you're not obligated to justify your choices or apologize for prioritizing your well-being.
Right. It's about honoring your own needs and well-being, which ultimately allows you to show up as your best self for others.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about setting boundaries with love and respect, both for yourself and for others.
And as you start setting boundaries and prioritizing your well-being, you might encounter some resistance from people who are used to you always saying yes.
That's true. Change can be unsettling for people, and some might try to guilt you into reverting back to your old patterns.
So how do you deal with those situations? How do you stay strong and not let others' opinions sway you?
It's important to stand firm in your boundaries. Remember why you're setting them in the first place, and don't let others' opinions sway you. You have the right to make choices that support your well-being, even if it means disappointing others.
So it's about staying true to yourself and your vision for your life, even if it means ruffling a few feathers along the way. But it's also about having compassion for those who might be struggling with your newfound assertiveness.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that their resistance might stem from their own insecurities or fears and not taking it personally. You can acknowledge their feelings while still standing firm in your boundaries.
So it's about finding that balance between being assertive and being compassionate, between honoring your own needs and respecting the feelings of others. But ultimately, it's about putting your own well-being first.
Exactly. And as you continue to prioritize your well-being and set healthy boundaries, you'll likely find that the people who truly care about you will respect your choices.
And those who don't, well, maybe it's time to reevaluate those relationships.
Exactly. Surround yourself with people who support your growth and celebrate your authenticity.
Because at the end of the day, it's about creating a life that feels good on the inside and out. A life that reflects your true values and aspirations.
And that's what it's all about, creating a life that you love, a life that feels aligned with your soul's purpose.
So we've talked about a lot today. From saying no to setting boundaries and even creating a positive support system, it's been quite a journey.
It really has. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't about achieving some kind of perfect state of boundary setting. It's an ongoing process of self-discovery and growth.
Totally. There will be times when you slip up, when you overcommit, or when you say yes, when you really meant to say no.
Of course, and that's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
The key is to notice those patterns, learn from them, and keep practicing.
So it's all about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself and remember that you're always learning and growing.
And hey, maybe even have a little laugh at yourself when you inevitably trip up. Because let's be real, life is messy.
Absolutely. It is. And boundary setting is no exception. The important thing is to keep moving forward, keep learning, and keep striving to create a life that feels good on every level.
And to celebrate those wins along the way, whether it's saying no to that extra project or finally making time for yourself, those are all victories.
They really are. Each step you take towards prioritizing your well-being is a step in the right direction.
So as we wrap up this conversation, what's one final thought you want to leave our viewers with?
Remember this. You are worthy of a life filled with joy, purpose, and peace. You have the power to create that life by setting boundaries, prioritizing your well-being, and making choices that align with your true self.
That is such a powerful message. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of you amazing viewers out there, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found this conversation insightful and inspiring. Remember, you have the power to create a life that you love. Don't be afraid to say no to the things that drain you and say yes to the things that light you up. Until next time, keep shining your light and keep embracing the power of no.